Okay. All right, good morning and welcome to Bible study. We are just 2 minutes off, but that's good because we have a lot to do this morning. All right, let us open in a word of prayer. God, we thank you for allowing us to be here, that we can have another Bible study. Just give us wisdom, give us understanding as we go through your word and learn more about you now, dear God. We thank you and praise you for this day. Pray for those who wanted to be here but couldn't. Thank you for allowing us to have Bible study just the same. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So today we are going to do Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. 3 books. This must be some record. And wrap up the life of Moses. Also remember, today is the final day and we're on break until sometime in September. Just keep watching the church announcements and you'll know the different times that we start back sometime in September, thereabout, with Sunday school. So we're wrapping up Moses. Listen, it was not easy to condense these 3 books, but I got it done and I got to look at the points that I want to look at, and so we're going to go into it because we can't waste any time. So, Moses, looking at Leviticus here now. Leviticus is simply put in terms, and you sum it up, it just simply means a holy people worshiping a holy God. That's what it means. And when you say that, what it means, that it's basically the book of the laws. What God told them they had to do to approach him, to worship him, and all of that. So that's where all the major laws are contained. And so, to sum up Leviticus, he wants them to approach him in a proper way. So God taught them how to approach a holy God. So chapter 1 to 7, he tells them how to do it through offerings, right? And then chapter 8 to 10 tells them how to approach him through the priesthood. Reason being, they're going to be priests now. He's getting all of that into order. Like how we have the church now, it started with that. The priesthood and the temple and all of that. How they should approach him. So in other words, where you see a lot of these pastors now who are fake and all of that, they're going to be judged for it. Because from back in those days, he was saying, even if you are in the church or the priesthood working directly for me, you should approach me in a special way. So, a lot of pastors are going to be, they're going to feel it when, when Jesus returns. And then he goes on to finish out the book of Numbers, the proper way to live for a holy God. So this is really the book of laws. And in chapter 11 to 15, he shows them laws of purification. In chapter 16, he talks about Day of Atonement. That is the major day for asking for forgiveness of sins. So even though you might have, brought your turtle dove or your different things for different sins that you have committed, at a certain point in the year, everybody must make sure that day you confess. So if you missed anything throughout the year and you don't remember, make sure that day doesn't pass you, because if you let it pass you, you're going to be in trouble. So you have the Day of Atonement. In chapter 17 to 22, he talks about laws regarding personal relationship. What do you do with a stranger? What do you do with this? How do you, somebody's goat offend you? All of those things. Work out the things between people. In chapter 23, he talks about the Sabbath and the 7 feasts. You always hear the children of Israel have special feasts that they're supposed to keep and all of these things. Of course, the Sabbath as well was given, the day of worship. And that's why I always tell people that decide they're still under the law, but they're not keeping the feast. I'm like, you can't keep the law. So you cannot take out part of the law and keep it and then say you're under the law. No, you have to do everything that is in there. And so it ends with chapter 24 to chapter 27, where it gives them more laws, more promises, and more warnings. So in other words, all of these things that were given, most of them were conditional. You go out there and he says, worship me, and if you don't worship me, I'll strike you. That's basically how he gave it to them. So this is Leviticus in a nutshell, right? And so Leviticus is basically a book of laws or instructions. So people might be saying, I don't understand the law. I want to know the law. Just go read Leviticus. Listen, when you hear some of these things, then you will appreciate the grace that God has given us. And you will understand we're living in the time of grace. Because if you were living in the time of law, off with your heads. That's it basically. And we will see that when the law was given and people transgressed the law, what happened to them. Right? God was specific in these laws and instructions. Right? Do this and this will happen. Disobey and you will be punished. Now, the punishment was left up to him. Sometimes he did tell you what the punishment is. Like for instance, he would say if someone was working witchcraft or doing something like that, they should be tied to the stake, burned and stoned to death or something. He told them what to do. Whew, that was terrible, right? Some people, though, they did not listen to God and they pushed God, so to speak, and it cost them their life. Well, I don't think God's going to kill me. We're his chosen people. I'm just going to do things my way. And so they did that. So in the book of Leviticus, we already see something like that happening. This was not the time for people to be breaking the law, because it was not the time of grace. Right? It was a serious offense to break God's law. And so, it did not matter who it was, God punished disobedience for all to see. That means when he punished them in the open for everyone to see. That was big. I mean, I don't know. I said to myself, I'm glad I was not Moses and I lived in that time. I'm okay with the grace that I have right now. So in Leviticus 10, right, 1 to 3, God already started to tell them how the priest should operate and the priesthood, and the priest should be the sons of Aaron. They should be, the family is going to be a high priest family, and the tribe of Levi is going to be the priest family. They're going to work in the temple. So God already started to tell them what should have happened. And so they were given, you ever see the Catholics when they're walking into church and you have this one guy swinging the incense and it's smoke here? They got it out of the Bible. It's not something they came up with. It's from the time of law. So it was like representing God's fiery presence being with them. So that's why light was in there and the fire and all of that. That's what it was represented. And so you don't light that fire unless God tells you to light that fire, or it's part of a law that it should be lit at a certain time to do something, you know, for atonement, for his presence or something like that. Well, some of these priests decided they're going to do things their own way. So there was a lighting of a fire and God accepted that. But now we find two of Aaron's sons deciding to light up when they felt like, and for different reasons. So this is where we pick up in Leviticus. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took their respective ceremonial censers and put fire in them, placed incense on it, and offered strange, unauthorized, unacceptable fire before the Lord. Who were they burning sacrifice to? The Bible says before the Lord. I don't want you to think they were doing it to idols. They were doing it before the Lord. But listen to what the Bible says, an act which he had not commanded them to do. Oh my Lord, this is how serious the time of law is. And fire came out from the presence of the Lord and devoured them. He burned them up because they disobeyed. Oh my, yeah, that's the time, right? And they died before the Lord. Wow, this is big. These are the priests. So everybody saw now, these are the ones that work in the temple and God striking them. So other people are like, let's get in line. Right? But listen how serious it is. Then Moses said to Aaron, this is what the Lord said. I'll be treated as holy by those who approach me. And before all the people I will be honored. That means if you keep disobeying, he's going to show you in front of the people you need to obey me. So Aaron therefore said nothing. Because his two sons just died right in front of him, and he's like, of course he wants to say something. But Moses spoke up before he said something, and God struck him too. That's what really happened here. I was telling you, you have to be careful when it comes to God, because if you don't, he's going to strike you, and if he strikes you, he's going to show everybody that he's striking you. So Aaron therefore said nothing, kept it in his head, because if he said it out loud, his tongue could have probably cost him his life. Wow. So after God killed Aaron's son, Moses had to see about getting rid of their bodies, of his own family, because they're his nephews. Sometimes people didn't get it when they were reading it, because the Bible refers to them as Aaron's son, but Aaron is who? His brother, his older brother. These are his nephews. So it is his family that is getting killed. Many people miss that, right? And he has to lead even though his family is getting killed, right? He asks now his uncle, because the Bible referred to it as Aaron's uncle. But if it's Aaron's uncle, it's his uncle too. Think about this. So he asks his uncle to get his sons. Who is his uncle's sons? His cousins. Oh my gosh. And many people miss this in the Bible. So he asks his uncle to get his sons to do it in a particular way, and everyone listen to his instructions. Don't just take them up like that. You got to do it this way. Make sure you dress this way, and make sure you do this thing. Because if they didn't, they would be struck too. He didn't want to lose any more family member. So they listened to his instructions, and they did it just like how Moses said. Now, Moses also had to instruct Aaron on what to do and what not to do to remain alive as the priest of Israel. Because he was now, think about it, this hurt him that his sons had been taken from him, and he wanted to rebel against God. But Moses was in his ears. Be calm, don't do anything stupid, because if you do this, you're not going to live to be the priest. So Moses had to talk to him. Now, imagine how hard it must have been for Aaron watching God strike his sons. That's big. And that's why sometimes some people get away from God because something happened to their children. And thank God you're standing in the gap just the same. But imagine how hard it is to lead knowing that God struck your children. Hard for him. And then imagine Moses overseeing everything, trying to let his relatives and the Israelites learn from this example. Because after talking to all Israel, he's going to sit down with the family. And they're going to be like, how could you let God do this? So Moses had to lead through all of this, even though his family felt God's power and God's discipline. And he still had to lead. And Moses still had to, Aaron still had to fulfill his role as a leader as well. This is big, right? So that is Leviticus in a nutshell. Woo, we're done. Woo, 15 minutes and Leviticus is over. Now we move on to Numbers. Now Numbers is simple as well. It is considered the journey to Canaan. So while Leviticus is the laws, Numbers is the journey to Canaan. Despite what most people think, they think the journey happened when, they crossed over the sea and the book of Joshua. No, it happened in Numbers. Not even in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy was just like a time span of a couple of weeks or so while they're waiting right at the gate. But Numbers is the big thing. Let me show you why. Right? So Numbers, they're leaving. Remember Mount Sinai, all of that. That's where they're leaving from. So it is the preparation for the journey. So Numbers starts in chapter 1 to chapter 10. God does an inventory. In other words, he runs a census so they can know how many people are there, how many in the army, right? He does consecration, all right? Now you know what you're supposed to do as a priest. Get yourselves cleansed, prepare and all of that. And he gave them final instructions. So now they're what? Getting ready to go to the promised land. The journey starts. So that's chapter 10 to chapter 21. they get to the promised land. People miss this. And they get there and they do not enter the promised land. So they get there, right? Red Sea, Mount Sinai, pause, then leave Mount Sinai, boom. They get there. And when they get there, they mess up. And God says, desert wanderings. And that's 40 years of their life. Because they listened the first time. And they never survive or get to see what God has in store for them. I always say, it reminds me of this church, that decisions we make here, if we don't make the right decision, some people are never going to live to see the prospects of what the church can be, because God can wait another 40 years. I can't. Moses couldn't either. He didn't live to see out all of that. 40 years, that's a long, I'll be 80 by then. I want mine now. I want to see it. Please. Right? So this is what happened. And so, chapter 22 to 36, this is when they get to the promised land a second time. So final preparation is ready now to enter the promised land. So Numbers covers them going the first time, they mess up, then 40 years of wandering, then those generations died and they're back where they started because God kept them in a circle for 40 long years doing a circle. Drive anybody nuts. And now that is where Numbers ends at 36, getting ready to go into the promised land the second time. So that's where it ends. So that's a nutshell of Numbers. So we'll look at some things in Numbers here, because Numbers has some things we have to look at. So here we go. The book of Numbers begins with the people being numbered, a census. Just like when they send out the census here and we have to tell them how many in our houses. I always tell people a lot of these things are not new. They fail to say they're in the history of the Bible and all of these things, but they are. Census is there. God took a census, right? Now, this is something most people miss. When they took the census, and I think it's from 20 up, the men, this is just the number for the men that are able to fight, from 20 up, it came to 1,207,100 males were fighting in the fighting age in Israel's army. 1 million. The men alone that are in fighting age. So we're not talking old men, whichever they consider to be old men, and we're not talking women and children. Sickly. 1,207,000. Now, I don't need to do any math to figure out that there's always more women and children. If there are 1 million men, let's just put it at least 2 million women and children. Right? Let's do 2 for every 1 male. But we know it's more than that. But that is... So, we are looking at the Levites were also excluded. So I needed to realize the number now goes up some more by a couple thousand. Because the Levites were men and they had families too and they had children too. So you had the Levites were excluded because they were on temple duty. So they weren't numbered in the army. Yeah, I know people miss this in the study. But guess what? We now have a better understanding of how many people Moses was leading. He was basically leading a small country. Now you see why sometimes it was so troublesome. Because if you are at the back of the country, try and put, let's say, 1,000 people in this yard here. No microphones. And I am talking to the people at the front. This is what happened and this is what God said we must do. Number 999 out the back. He's like, what did he say? He says this. He always telling us that God says this and all. That's what really happened. So you have some people who are always what? Way at the back. They probably didn't see some of the miracles through their eyes. They heard it. Yesterday, God struck somebody with fire. Did you see it? No, I heard from the person at the top. So this is what was happening, right? And so probably when God did some things, they would see the fire going, but they didn't know who got struck because they could see God's fire coming down from heaven, but they wouldn't know what was going on. Let me put it this way so people can understand it. It doesn't matter who is the president of the USA. Not everyone does or like what the president says. That's the simplest way to understand it. It's the same thing with Moses. He's in charge, but not everybody gonna like or what he says or what he does. That's the simplest way to look at it. Right? So when leading, one of the worst things that could happen to you is when people oppose you. Right? And some people get very offensive when people oppose them. I try to listen and find out their views and see where they're coming from. But this made it a little bit worse. What made it worse is when the oppositions come from the people close to you. That means you're sitting and talking with them, and if there was something wrong, they should have said, "Hey, Mario, I think something is wrong. Let's talk up." No, they went behind your back. They discussed it with other people, and then they're causing trouble when they should have come to you because they're close to you. So, Moses faced this problem with two important people. Miriam, his sister, and Aaron, his brother. You already know why Aaron has a contention. Because he can't really say it out loud and say, "I don't like God because he killed my sons." But he can take it out on his brother because that's his baby brother. Simple. Miriam could be coming from that part too. But when we read the scriptures, that's not the point they attacked it from. They attacked it from the point that he now had a wife that was not from among their people. Now remember, God had told them certain things in the law. They shouldn't marry outside, they shouldn't this and they shouldn't that. In their minds, he has transgressed the law. Why does he get to transgress the law? Well, he got married before the law was given. Duh! So are many of you. And people that are among you are not even true Israelites. And God made a way for them in the law too. So why are you complaining? But I figured they were upset for other things, but this is the best way to get at him. So God heard them talking. Moses wasn't there. They were meeting with other people, probably family members, and they were complaining and bad-mouthing Moses for his Cushite wife. That's what they called her, because she wasn't true Israelite. And she had 2 sons, so that means they were saying the sons were bastards. And so God stepped in for Moses and took charge of the situation. And he called all 3 of them to the tent where we'd come down. And he called them by name, "Meet me at the tent." And so, this is where they all met at the tent. Right? When they met at the tent, God came down in the cloud form, and then he started to talk to all 3 of them. But then he started talking to Miriam. It says, let's look at the story quickly. Now Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman who he had married. For he had married a Cushite woman. Yeah, wasn't there. And they said, "Has the Lord really spoken only through Moses?" Remember, all of them have experienced something. She was a prophetess, right? Aaron was the high priest, but they were upset, right? And listen what they said. "Has he not spoken also through us? And the Lord heard it." So you see, they were now putting themselves in the thing like, we should probably take over this thing, right? Get little brother out of the way. Because they were upset with him, right? So the Lord called all 3 of them to appear before him to address the situation. Daddy called all the kids. "Come here." Why you're fighting? Come here. Now listen what the Lord said to Miriam. And he said this to all of them because they were there. "Hear now my words. If there's a prophet among you," notice he started and he was saying a prophet because Miriam was the what? Prophetess. She was yeah. "I, the Lord, will make myself known to him in a vision, and I will speak to him in a dream. But it is not so with my servant Moses." Listen how God describes him. "He is entrusted and faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth directly." Whoa. We all know what he did last week when we looked. He asked, "Can I meet you?" So nobody can say he didn't meet God. He did. Right? Clearly and openly and not in riddles. So God says, I'm done talking to Moses now like before when I didn't give him all of that. Remember when we just started? Moses only got things in part. God is saying, I stop that now. We talk directly. So I give him clearly and openly and not in riddles. And beholds, and he said, and beholds the form of the Lord. So that means every time he comes to me, he sees a form of me right in front of him. He doesn't have to throw anything, any incense, or boom, I come. I appear. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? Don't you think that's not wise? That's what God is saying. If this man has access to me, why are you speaking against him? You should be afraid to do that. That's what God is saying. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against Miriam and Aaron, and he departed. So God left the tent. His presence left, the cloud disappeared. But when the cloud had withdrawn from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. And Aaron turned and looked at Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. You know what they do with leper? Cast them out. They're no longer with the people anymore, because it's contagious back then. So now she's going to stay, and the chances of you surviving leprosy at that time was very slim. Few people did, but you might lose a limb or something, but most people died. Right? And they wouldn't want to wait on you to see if you're going to make it, because you might take a long time to get better. If you were coming to get water from somewhere to do something, you'd have to say, leper, leper. And people are like, ah! Streets cleared. So listen to this. Aaron got scared and immediately begged Moses to not let their sister die of leprosy. He even called Moses Lord. He got so scared. We have sinned, Lord Moses. Don't let our sin cause our sister to die. And so Moses interceded on her behalf. Nevertheless, God said she would remain that way for 7 days. Yeah, I hear you, Moses. I'm not going to kill her, but she's going to feel it for 7 days. And so she was cast out of the camp, had to stay away from everybody else for 7 days. No movement occurred. They could not walk anymore. They had to what? Wait on Miriam for 7 days, an entire week, because of her sin. And wait until she came back. Then they did, remember, the things for purification. They had to follow all that laws, check her and everything and stuff, before they said, okay, you can come back within us. 7 days, all because Miriam did that. So, the people now, after all of that, they got quiet. They were like, let's behave ourselves. So they eventually got to the promised land. Real quick, they're there. Everything is good. And God said to them, send out the spies into the land. So God was the one that told them to send the spies, you know. And so they sent the spies. Moses told them, and the spies went. Moses had already put people, because it was such a big group, he appointed leaders. So Joshua, Caleb, other people were leaders over thousands, over this and over that. He sent the leaders to spy out the land. So he didn't say, hey, you come here. No. He took the leaders who he had already appointed to spy out the land. Oh, Lord have mercy. Most spies came back with a negative report. Listen, they brought even food from it. They brought grapes, and the grapes were so heavy they had to carry it. With 2 persons had to carry the cluster on a stick. That's how big the land was, fruitful. It was great. But they carried back a negative report. The people lost hope, and they complained. God decided he would not let that generation enter because they doubted his power. Right? They didn't trust in him. He led them away into the wilderness for 40 years until all who he wanted to die was dead. Yep, that's what God did. So, we are going to pick up right here in Numbers and see where that happens. So, Moses sent spies from the wilderness of Paran at the command of the Lord. All of them men who were heads of the Israelites. He didn't choose. He thought in himself he was taking people who were mature and would understand that this is the work of the Lord. Well, it didn't work out. When they returned from spying out the land, at the end of 40 days, they came to Moses and Aaron, to all the congregation of the sons of Israel, in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. and brought back word to them and to all the congregation, and showed them the land's fruits, right? They reported to Moses and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and certainly it does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruits. Shows you that God did not what? Lie. God was telling them, this is a fruitful land, milk and honey. This was God's speech. So they heard God saying that. But boy, did they listen. If he promised to bring you somewhere, and when you go it's like that, why would he stop? They didn't listen. Listen to the but. Remember I tell you, when you see but in the Bible, it means pay attention. But the people who live in the land are strong, and their cities are fortified, walled, and very large. Moreover, guess what we saw? We saw the descendants of Anak, people of great stature and courage. Now, people are saying, who are the descendants of Anak? Giants. We're not talking NBA players that are like 6 feet something or 7 foot, right? When David battled Goliath, he was over 9 feet tall. Not 9 feet, over 9 feet. Think about that. When somebody here, I think the tallest man lived to be, he was like 7 feet, almost 8 feet, or 8 feet 2 inches, or something like that. But he couldn't stand straight. He, his bones couldn't shoulder all of that, and he was that tall. Back in those days, before all the diseases and stuff, somebody over 9 feet tall, they were ready to fight. And so they saw that 9-foot people, and they were like, holy moly, let's get out of here. So that's what the descendants of Anak were, the giants, right? It was clearly seen that the land was fruitful, but the spies who were leaders over the people struck fear in the hearts of the people. And so the people decided, we ain't going. Let's get out of here. So this is where we pick up in Numbers 13, verse 30 to 31. Then Caleb, because remember Joshua and Caleb went to, quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession of it, for we will clearly or certainly conquer it. He was trusting in God. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people of Canaan, for they are too strong for us. So it's 2 people saying we can do it, Joshua and Caleb. The rest are like, no, you're wasting your time. Logically, we can't win. That's what they were saying. This is what happened. Then all the congregation of Israel raised their voices and cried out. You need to listen to this to see how people really forget who God is. And the people wept that night. All the Israelites murmured in discontent against Moses and Aaron. And the whole congregation said to them, oh, that we had died in the land of Egypt, or that we had died in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land of Canaan to fall by the sword? Our wives and our children will become plunder. Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? These are the same people who God parted the Red Sea for and walked on dry land and killed the people who were enslaving them. They want to go back under bondage. So they said one to another, listen to this part, let us appoint a new leader and return to Egypt. Let us appoint somebody to deliver us back into slavery. Anybody want somebody to come and be the president and say, let us appoint somebody to lead us to be slaves under China? Nobody's going to vote for that person. And this is what they're thinking. Oh boy, this angered God. So only Joshua and Caleb from the spies tried to convince the people that they could take the land. Of course, nobody was listening. And when Moses and Aaron heard the complaints of the people, they fell on their faces and interceded for the people. Aaron knows already that God is upset. He's not even waiting on Moses. He's along with Moses. Oh God, please forgive them. Oh God, please don't kill them. Don't kill me. Because he knows what is coming. Listen, Joshua and Caleb tore their clothes in mourning for the people's sin as well, because they understand what is coming. They knew what was going to be done. And so, God was going to kill them all. But Moses begged for their lives. God says, just step back, Moses. Let me deal with this. And he's like, no. And he's like, I'm just going to kill them and start with a new generation. Don't worry, I'll give you a new set of people. And Moses said, are you crazy, God? If you do that, the Egyptians are going to hear about it. You took them all the way over the Red Sea to kill them. No, don't do it. That's the kind of the conversation they had. That is big, right? So, God relented from his anger, punished them, but he didn't kill everybody, but he still killed a few, or more than a few. Listen to this, he killed an entire generation. So he says to Moses, say to them, as I live, says the Lord, just what you have spoken in my hearing, I will most certainly do to you. You said it out of your mouth, I heard you. That's what God said. Your dead bodies will fall in this wilderness. Remember they said, we should wait in the wilderness to die. God says, okay, you're going to die in the wilderness. Then he says, even all who are numbered of you, your entire number from 20 years old and upward. Who was that? Remember the army? 20 years and up. See? God did the census, so he knows. Right? And he says, who have murmured against me, except for Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. Not one of you shall enter the land in which I swore an oath to settle you. But your children, whom you said would become a plunder, I will bring in. Because you said good for your children, you said bad for your children, I'll give them good. And they will know the land which you have despised and rejected. But as for you, your dead bodies, your dead bodies will fall in the wilderness. Your sons will be wanderers, and your shepherd will be wanderers and shepherds in the wilderness for 40 years. And they will suffer for your unfaithfulness, your spiritual infidelity, until your corpses are consumed in the wilderness, according to the number of days in which you spied out the land of Canaan, 40 days. For each day you shall bear and suffer a year. Woo! For your sins and guilt. For 40 years you shall know my displeasure, the revoking of my promise and my estrangement because of your sin. I, the Lord, have spoken. That means he ain't taking it back. Right? I will most certainly do this to all this evil congregation who are gathered together against me. Woo. And gathered together against me. In this wilderness, they shall be consumed. Listen what's going to happen to them. War, disease, and plagues. And here shall they die. So they're not all going to see. Some people are thinking, okay, we're going to get old and die. Some of you going dead in war. You're going to have to fight. You didn't want to fight. I'm going to let people come and attack you. And then some of you, I'm going to give you plagues. Right? And some of you, I'm going to get sick. So that's what he said. Now, when the people heard this, they were saddened by what God said. Oh my Lord! No, Moses! Tell him to change his mind. No. Alright, you know what, Moses? So this is what they said. They tried to convince Moses, since they're already here, they should just go and take the land. Alright, Moses, we hear you. 40 years is a long time. Strike a deal with God. We'll go now and go fight. Tell her the honest truth. We'll go fight right now. Little bit too late. Moses warned them if they did, they would lose any battle they go into, as God was not among them. So they realized, we stepped into it. So they had to now wander in the wilderness for 40 years until all those people died. 40 years ain't a chicken feed now. Because if you take 40 years from my life, I'm 3. Right? So that's a long time. Right? Only Joshua and Caleb and the other younger generation made it through the wilderness to see the promised land. Wow, that is crazy right there. So Moses led them off, but guess what? Going for 40 years is not easy. And so Moses faces more opposition, this time from some of his leaders. Because think about it. You know, you're leading them, but you ain't going anywhere. And the people want to stay. Hey, we like right here. Let's stay right here. No, we have to go south. Where are we going south? God already gave you the map. Circle, right? And so some of the leaders now are like, we got to take over. We can't do this anymore. So this is what happened. You had a guy named Korah and another guy, but Korah was the leader. So this is what happened. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, son of Kohath, son of Levi, and Dathan, and Abiram, the sons of Elab, and on the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben, took men. So he was leading, and he had a core of people following him, and they also got more people to follow them. So he contacted other leaders who were over other leaders, and they all now came to Moses. Now look, listen to this. And they rose up before Moses with a number of people of Israel, 250 chiefs of congregation. We're talking millions of people, so 250 leaders out of all the leaders were now against. That's a lot. That's enough to change the swing vote. As people would say, you want to get into the House of Parliament, you have to have the most votes. Well, they're right there with the most votes now, because these are the leaders. Now listen to this. It says, these are the chiefs of the congregation chosen from the assembly, well-known men. So it's not people who don't have positions. They assembled themselves together against Moses and also against who? Aaron. Aaron, who's trying to be passive and not get into anything. Aaron too. And said to them, you have gone too far, for all in the congregation are holy. Remember what Leviticus is? How to live. Holy people approach a holy God. They're telling Moses he's doing it wrong. And everybody is holy now. Right? Every one of them. And the Lord is among them. So everybody is holy because we've all been doing it. And God is among all of us. Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord? So Moses fell on his face, and Aaron and all of them, and he says, we'll meet back. And when we meet back next day, we will see who God chooses to lead. Simple. Because I guess you can talk to him just like me face to face. Go ahead, do what you have to do. And this is what happened. So Korah and his followers felt it was time they took over from Moses and Aaron. Right? They felt they were holy enough to lead the people and do the priestly duties and God would use them to do a better job than Moses and Aaron. In short, they really just wanted to be in charge of the people because they wanted to do their own thing now. They didn't want to wander in the wilderness anymore. Right? God took care of this problem because they had to come to God. That's how the rules are. There's no other way. So, this is what happened. And as soon as Moses had finished speaking, so Moses said, okay. And he said his speech, and they're all there with incenses and altars. Remember, they didn't learn from the last time, don't light fire when God didn't say to light fire. They were all there because they were all leaders. And so they took other people's incense. Some of them were in priestly thing, and they were doing it themselves. And Moses said what he was going to say. And as soon as he finished speaking all these words, the ground under them split apart. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up. So this is Korah and his followers. Now all the 250 leaders yet, we haven't gotten to those. Remember there were two sets of people, the big leaders and the other leaders. So he said, listen to this, and it swallowed them up with their households and all the people who belonged to Korah and their goods. He took the family too. Because this man didn't shut his mouth, his entire family was killed. Right? So they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, right? Remember we explained where hell is, the holding place. They're already there. Oh my Lord. They got a quick trip to hell. Right? And it says they are there, and the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. And all Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up. And the fire come from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. So, while some people are saying, Lord, I don't want the earth to swallow me up, fire came down. Meanwhile, they're running. And the other men who were like, were burned up as well. So they saw two things that day. The earth opening and swallowing some people. And they also saw 250 men burned alive with fire from God. Are we living in the time of grace? Thank you, Jesus. When people tell me they want to go back to law, this is law. I don't want to go back to law. I'm going to stick with grace. Right? By the next day, some of the congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses because they liked some of these men. They liked Korah. These were popular men and their families and all of that. So they grumbled against Moses and against Aaron, saying, you have killed the people of the Lord. Was it Moses who killed them? No, it was God. Well, of course, God stepped in again, right? Because of this opposition, God struck the people with another plague. Because they would not listen. Moses had to tell Aaron what to do to intercede for the people. He went, quick, go light your thing and put it on this and do that, so that God's anger will be appeased. And that's what happened. But listen, by the time he did that, the plague already killed 14,700 people. Wow. So I'm telling you, this was law. And this was what was happening in Numbers. Right? They caused it on themselves because they wouldn't go in the first time. So they have 40 years of this to continue in. Oh my Lord. So we have to remember wandering in the wilderness is for 40 years. Right? People died. Including even Miriam. She died. Right? Which was Moses' sister. This means for 40 years Moses had to lead a people who complained and who were rebellious. Right? Being a leader is not easy. No, listen to this. You had people who still were not learning and they still were rebellious. So it says here, from Mount Hor they set out by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom. Let me stop right there. They're going where? The way of the what? Red Sea. So when people ask me, are they going in circles? Yes, they are. Because they already left what? The Red Sea. That's Exodus, man. They left the Red Sea and was going the other. Now they're coming back to the Red Sea. Are they going in circles? Yes, they are. So, it says, and the people became impatient on the way. They're good with being patient and rebellious. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? I know some people are thinking, why are they so dumb? 40 years is not a short time. So you need to remember, time is moving. We get it quickly. We're getting the quick version. But 40 years, so probably 5 years had passed and chorus people had died, you know. So they were complaining again. And it says, for there is no food and no water. That's what they said, but listen to what they said afterward. And we loathe this worthless food. God was giving them food. He was feeding them. But at the same time, when they start complaining, they're considering what he's giving them is not good enough food. So it's not food. But we loathe what we get because it's worthless food. When you were a slave, are you getting better food? Then the Lord sent fiery serpents among the people. In other words, he sends venomous snakes. Oh Lord. And they bit the people so that many people of Israel died. And the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he will take away the serpents from us. So Moses prayed for the people, and the people said to Moses, And the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole. Make a big snake, the bronze snake, put it on a pole, wrap it around it, make that. And he says, anyone, right, everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, he shall live. So Moses made a bronze serpent and set it on a pole. And if a serpent bit anyone, he would look at the bronze serpent and live. Now remember, over 2 million, 3 million, 4 million people, you're in the back and you got bit. They have to now put you on a stretcher. Come on, let's go. We got to get to the pole in time before you die. The person goes, oh. Think about that. So that was, you can imagine the traffic of people trying to get to see that pole, because, so God didn't make it easy for them. That is what they went. But they didn't learn. And that's how they continued for 40 years. Right? Moses had to continue leading the people in a circle until the time for their punishment was finished. Wow. Moses himself got mixed up, oh, I felt it for him, and was punished because of a miracle he was supposed to perform. They were complaining again about water, and God says, I'm going to let everybody honor and respect you, because Moses kept on saying, they don't respect me. And he says, okay, listen to me, just go. Because remember, already they had problems with water and he had touched it with the staff. He says, don't touch it. Go there with the staff, stand up and just say, water. And water is going to come out of it. And people are going to think of you like a god. That's what he was saying to Moses. Well, when Moses got there, he got a little bit upset. And he was talking to them and whatever. And he struck the rod once on the rock. And then nothing happened. He struck it a second time and then water came. Well, God was like, you disobeyed me. Why did you do that? And because of that, he was not going to enter the promised land. Look how much work he did, man. Look how much work he did. And God told him he would not enter the promised land because of that time he disobeyed God. Remember when I said God will punish you, don't care who you are? Now you see, even Moses gets his. Right? So we are at Deuteronomy. Woohoo! We're going to wrap this up. This is the last book now. And so we're at Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is best known as the final message of Moses. Basically, remember and obey. That's what Moses, he's dying. And he's like, remember what God did and obey. That's what the book of Deuteronomy is all about. So chapter 1 to 4, Moses reviews the past. He's writing it down and telling them to read it. Then chapter 5 to 26, he talks about the testimonies. He talks about the different things God has put in place. And he talks about judgments if you don't listen to what he says. He then commands them to set up an altar in chapter 27. Chapter 27 also, he reminds them again to obey the law. And still in chapter 27, he says, if you don't obey the law, curse will follow you. But if you obey the law, blessings will follow you. Then chapter 29 to 30, he says there's a new covenant. Because you guys are the new people. You know, the others didn't make it. So he talks about that. Then before he dies, he gives them a final charge again. Make sure you obey. Then, you know, he's getting old. And his song, he writes a song. So they can sing to remind them of the goodness of the Lord. Then, chapter 34, Moses dies. Before they go into. So that's why when Deuteronomy finishes, you get into the book and it's called Joshua. That's when they actually cross into the promised land. Because he dies in Deuteronomy. Wow. Right? So, to wrap up Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy tells us Aaron dies and his son takes his place as high priest. So he didn't see the promised land either. Aaron died, his son took over. Right? Moses also knows his time is limited because the people are at the gate of the promised land. God already told him, you ain't going in. So he knows it's wrapping up time. Right? He basically reminds the people of everything God has done and said to them. In other words, remember what God has done, acknowledge him in whatever you do, and obey his commands. That's what Deuteronomy is all about. He tells the people, make sure you tell all the coming generations about God. Tell your children, rehearse it in their ears so they know and don't forget. So that's what he did. right? And then it is now time for Moses to die. And so this is the final passage we're about to look at right now. And it says in Deuteronomy 34, 1-8, it says, "Now Moses went up from the plains of Moab to the mount of Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, that is opposite Jericho." See? Where did they attack first? Jericho. Remember? And the same fortified walls, and the walls came tumbling down. You see, they had listened the first time. God already had the plan. It's the same plan. Right? They just don't listen. "And the Lord showed him all the land from Gilgad to Dan, and all Naphtali, and the land of Ephraim, and Manasseh, and all the land of Judah to the western sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and Negev, south country, and in the plain in the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. Then the Lord said to him, This is the land which I swore to Abram, to Isaac, and to Jacob, saying, I will give it to your descendants. I have let you see it with your eyes, but you shall not go over there." God tells him again, you ain't going, buddy. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, according to the word of the Lord. And he buried him in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor, but no one knows where his burial place is to this day. Very honorable thing that God did here for Moses. He buried him. No human buried Moses. God buried Moses. So nobody knew where his grave was. Nobody could go visit his body. Nobody, because God buried him. First funeral service kept by God. Wow. He was pastor, preacher, choir director, everything, and buried Moses. Very important that he got this honor. Very important that people see this as well. Moses did not die because he got old and sickly. I missed this. This was something I just saw. Because how did I miss this? I don't know. This study showed me this. And when I read it, I went, what? Listen to this. Although Moses was 120 years old when he died, 120 and kicking, his eyesight was not dim, nor his natural strength abated. This man was 120-year-old and still could be fit to run the marathon. Everything was good, right? So God took his breath from him. That is why I probably didn't allow anybody else to see when he did that. Who knows? He probably know. It's not in the Bible, but probably he met with him face to face. He said, no, you have to come home. You will see my face. Because you shall not live. You know, it's something to think about. That could have probably happened. But he wasn't sick or anything. All he knew, he told everybody bye, went up to the mountain, and whatever it was, he never came back. They knew he was dead. And knew it was time for Joshua. So the sons of Israel wept for Moses in the plain of Moab for 30 days. And after they finished weeping and all of that, then the days of weeping and mourning for Moses were ended. Time for war. And that's how we get into the book of Joshua. And that's the life of Moses. Man, it's a good study to find out some things about them. That God can keep somebody 120 years fit and still kicking to do whatever he wants him to do. And so, the things we learned from this study in Moses, just some of the things to keep us in mind. Leadership. Very important. We now have a model to look at when we have a pastor or somebody in the church and we're like, he doesn't line up to Moses. Because this is what happened, and we know how we should talk to God. We know how to approach God. Because Moses did it. If you are faithful to God, we learn from Moses, he will be faithful to you. He was faithful to Moses right down till the end of his life. Right? We also learn obedience to God is always best. And it doesn't matter who you are, when you disobey God, he will punish you. Moses got that. Right? We also learn God will fight for you. Many of the battles Moses couldn't fight. Because there were more people than him. 250 people, what could he do? They could have easily well killed him and threw him out. But God fight for Moses, and he realized God will fight for you. We also learned, when in doubt, ask God. If you're not sure what to do, ask God. Better than getting ourselves in trouble. So we learned that from the study. We also learn, pray for people. Because sometimes your prayer is saving their lives. How many times did Moses save the lives of the children of Israel? Because he prayed for them and interceded on their behalf. And we also learn, stand with the Lord despite what may come. That's the winning side. So even though people saying it doesn't look good, pastor is on his own, I'm standing on the winning side. It doesn't look good for you. It looks good for me because I'm standing with God. Right? And finally, there is nothing too great to ask of God. We found that out with Moses. I want to meet you. What? I want to meet you. So all of these things we have learned from the study of Moses. 2 minutes past 12. 3 books in an hour. And that is Bible study for this session, for this series, for this until we come again in September. Thank you all for coming and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
And this was I had people calling me